Hi, beautiful people. Today we are battling purity culture again.
Sex is supposed to join the two. The problem is when you rip apart, this may be the only thing that's left of you.
Before we get into this mess, thanks period panties. I'm their ambassador. I love thanks. Click below for the God is Grey offer code. Also, incredible news, we finally have God is Grey merch. I collaborated with the incredible Mara O'Hara. She is a tattoo artist based in Los Angeles, and she designed the graphic for this incredible RIP Purity Culture t-shirt. Go to teespring.com, search for God is Grey. I'll also have the link below. Okay, so a lot of you have been asking me to comment on Mike Todd. Mike Todd is an author and co-pastor of the Transformation Church alongside his wife, Natalie. I don't know too much about this couple or this church, but I can tell you one positive. I love their stance on online services in the middle of COVID. Praise Jesus, seriously. I know we're exhausted. I know there's so much controversy surrounding masks and the COVID crisis, but it feels so good to see a church standing up for protecting humankind. We know a lot of churches out there have not been doing the same thing. That said, it appears the Todds went viral with their series Relationship Goals, which has since become a book. Their channel boasts over 1 million subscribers, and the first things I noticed were superficial, to be honest, meaning Todd is handsome, fashionable, and well lit. This presentation is not new to me. Being an exvangelical, I am very used to seeing churches that look like concerts and pastors who look like pop stars. And those churches were not healthy for my walk with God. So when I see that, I usually get immediately wary. But my hope, obviously, is that transformation is a place where people are in healthy community and in healthy relationship with Jesus. But I have only seen Todd's sermons on sexuality, and they are steeped in purity culture. First, Todd says this.
You've never written this note down before in your whole life, I promise you. It's a good one. Sex was God's idea. A lot of y'all looking at me like, I ain't never took that note in my whole life.
Y'all, this is amusing because I have heard this statement so many times. This phrase is actually the typical preface to purity culture messages.
This was God's idea.
Reminding your congregation that sex isn't bad, that it's a beautiful thing created by a divinity, is a good start. Unfortunately, what follows this statement is always a mess.
You're hooking up with them and you rip away, and then you hook up with them and you rip away. You will never be everything God called you to be because people are walking around with pieces of you.
And before we dive in, I do want to clarify something that's very, very important to me. I've built God is Grey, this platform, this beautiful community that we're all a part of. And when I make these call outs about doctrines or theologies that I disagree with and that maybe you disagree with as well, please remember that people are not our enemy. I'm a purity culture survivor. I know many of you out there are. So this is not about dragging Mike Todd. This is about saying, hey, we want you to look at this from a different point of view so that more people don't get hurt by this stereotypical message. And I just want y'all to remember that mission, to be kind, to be full of love, and to lead in that way. So Mike and Natalie Todd, anyone else listening, purity culture hurts people. According to books like Pure and You Are Your Own, upwards of millions of people have been damaged by these messages. The overall message of purity is not only that we save ourselves sexually for a heterosexual marriage, but also that not doing so risks losing pieces of yourself, your destiny, your shot at a healthy marriage.
It robs something from them.
Which is a wild thing for Pastor Mike to claim because he himself appears to be happily married and living out his destiny. Which brings us to another very common and infuriating point of purity messages.
I'm sad to say I wasn't a virgin when I got married to my wife.
I was 12, 15, 17, 19, 21, hearing this purity message over and over again from pastors who did not save sex for marriage. And Pastor Mike Todd, you said it yourself.
78% of African Americans will have a sexual experience before they get out of high school. 52% for Hispanic, 47% for white people.
So that's a lot of people in your congregation who have had sex, who are having sex, and you preaching this message, no matter how well-intentioned, historically has the power to hurt, not help Christian people. And I'm here to tell you all that there is a healthier way to look at God-honoring sex, and purity culture is not it. In the simplest explanation, purity culture is the teaching of abstinence until marriage. This culture enjoyed a major surge in the 80s and 90s with True Love Waits, and then became even more extreme with Joshua Harris's I Kiss Dating Goodbye, which Harris has since apologized for. I'm going to give you 4 major themes that will help you recognize when you're being given a purity culture message, so you can recognize and reject it. The first major theme of purity culture is that sexual acts will make you lose pieces of yourself, that you'll be damaged, that you'll be less than for having sex.
They go through life from person to person to person to person to person, and they get burned and burned and burned and burned, and then they try to present themselves as something that's spotless, but it has a bunch of singes and broken pieces.
This point is often shown through object exercises.
This may be the only thing that's left of you.
Meaning that our bodies, primarily female bodies, are compared to chewed up, disgusting pieces of gum or half-eaten chocolate bars. Or in Mike Todd's case, which at least includes both genders, ripped up paper. 3 things. Our bodies are not objects. God didn't create chocolate bars and gum and paper in his image. He created us in his image. We are not things. 2, sexual connection is a renewable resource. I should know, I have had a lot of sex. And my life is also a testament to number 3, which is that having sex outside of marriage does not diminish our capacity for love or our ability to be in future healthy relationships. The second major theme of purity culture is that it attempts to build a sexual ethic on fear. Y'all, fear is not a foundation. Love is. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. When you rely on fear to motivate your choices or to motivate the choices of your congregation, you are building a sexual ethic on fear, and that foundation will crumble. And it is not of God. Here's an example of fear-based theology.
People used to have so much purpose and so much confidence and so much going for them, and then they made that wrong decision and connected with people outside of the covenant of marriage, and then it robbed something from them.
There's 2 big issues with this statement. 1, telling people we lose pieces of ourselves through sexual acts can be devastating for assault victims. Famous kidnap and assault victim Elizabeth Smart was taught that having sex would liken her to chewed up gum.
She said, imagine you're a stick of gum. When you engage in sex, that's like getting chewed.
She says this is why, when she was kidnapped and assaulted, she didn't feel worthy of being saved.
Why would it even be worth screaming out? Why would it even make a difference if you are rescued? Your life still has no value. Nobody re-chews a piece of gum. You throw it away.
Pastor Mike, you have to consider how your words will land on victims. And this clip is even worse.
Everybody has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We were molested and we were hurt, drunk in college, and I had somebody give me some pills. My life is stained.
Please stop calling victims sinners. And 2, on a lighter note, I have been very open about my sexual past. My memoir on this will be coming out in spring 2021. Get excited, follow the On Her Knees Instagram for more details. But as someone who thoroughly lived in hookup culture, I am just too experienced to believe these lies about sex. I absolutely believe that sex can hurt us. But I've also got to be honest. I've had wonderful connected and even healing sexual experiences with people who are still my friends that I still love today. And I'm with a man who is confident enough to accept me in totality, because yes, I am still a whole person with no missing pieces. Which brings us to soul ties, which is essentially the belief that each sexual partner aligns with you spiritually and you are still intertwined, even if you break apart, even if you were never together.
I wasn't insecure until after I got with you, and that insecurity transferred to me, and I used to be so confident in what God called me to do, but now there's pieces of you that got off on me.
I do not believe that a person's flaws, like their insecurity or their anger, can literally be transferred from their body to mine. That is a fear-based teaching. But we can and should talk about toxic relationships and the reality that yes, sex is a connected experience, and that act can make you feel very connected to an unsafe person, a bad relationship. Sex is unifying, it's deep, even when you don't intend it to be. But still, our choices are to be made from love and not fear. It is empowering to teach and to receive comprehensive sex education, education on relationships, trauma bonding, all of these other fascinating facets of human connection and sexual relationship. Which brings us to the third major theme of purity culture, which is to perpetuate sexual myths. One myth is, quote, biblical sex and what it looks like. This point will be quick. Check out my video on biblical marriage for more details.
When God, back in the day, recognized a marriage was not when there was a wedding dress and groomsmen and cute pics on Instagram.
Pastor Mike is right. Biblical marriage did not have white wedding dresses or Instagram pics. Biblical marriage was the legal transference of property from one man to another. In the Bible, a girl, often very young, was legally the property of her father until she was legally the property of her husband.
The marriage was consummated when the man and the wife came together in the marriage bed and they had sex.
And yes, consummation, aka sex, made it official.
Because there's a blood transfer that happens there and all these things happen right in that moment, and God says that's where covenant started.
It is 2020, and we know the absence of a hymen is not proof of penetration. In some countries, girls have been thrown into the streets or even murdered for not bleeding during her sexual debut. So this myth is dangerous and really needs to stop. Which takes us to our fourth and final major theme of purity culture, the notion that it takes shame and fear to create a godly sexual ethic. Lovers, the exact opposite is true. Here's an example of shame.
See, when you start being sexually impure, lying comes in, deception, doubt. You've never met anybody who's sexually impure, but a good person really on the inside.
No, Mike. Sexual activity does not immediately come with lies, deception, and doubt. Those negative emotions arrive because of shame and fear, because church is not traditionally a safe place to have honest, truly honest conversations about sex. This is because in church we've created a black and white sexual ethic. I truly did, on this 12-year journey, exactly what Pastor Mike is saying here.
I'm not trying to figure out what's a sin or not. I'm trying to figure out, will this help me reach purpose or not? Is this relationship gonna push me into the place God has called me to be?
Who am I aligning with, and do they make me feel edified and excited about life or horrible? And I did this with God, like Mike says here.
And I'm giving you my sexuality.
In my opinion, pastors really need to let go of the reins and trust that if they are empowering their congregations with comprehensive sex education and the keys to sexual integrity, that their congregants will make wise, healthy choices for their sexuality. And this is why I promote sexual integrity. RIP purity culture. Purity culture is built on fear. Sexual integrity is built on love of yourself and others. And if you're a spiritual person, God. And you might realize the best thing for you is to save sexual experiences for marriage. And that is not only beautiful, but it is perfectly okay. Because like Pastor Mike Todd said,
sex was God's idea.
And if you want to learn more about sexual integrity, here are some principles of my own. And that's it. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, donate to my Patreon or Venmo if you can. I love you all so much. God bless.